Okay, hello, good afternoon. Welcome to the workshop on methane emissions reduction and cooperation between EU and Eastern Partnership countries. My name is Adrian Kondaszewski and I work for the Polish permanent representation to the European Union in Brussels. And this workshop is co-organized together with European Commission, Ministry of Energy of Ukraine, and Florence School of Regulation. As I said, we will run a discussion on methane emissions in close neighborhood of the European Union, and I think both the timing and the subject of this discussion is crucial and great. As just 3 days ago, during COP, leaders of more than 100 countries endorsed the Global Methane Pledge, aiming at reaching 30% cuts in emissions by 2030. And we're going to have discussions on this subject with great panelists that I shortly introduce. And our discussion will be divided into two sections. In the first one, we will more generally discuss what are the methane emissions and why cuts are necessary, and what are the goals of GMP, but also the International Methane Observatory. We're gonna discuss what the European Union is proposing, and then how to achieve those proposals both internally within the EU, but also outside. In the second panel, we will host representatives of companies who are operating on EU neighboring markets, and we'll try to learn what is the perspective of gas sector on the methane emission cuts, and what are the challenges and possible next steps, and what are the technologies and possible obstacles. So we're going to cover lots of very interesting issues. And each of the sessions will be followed by a short questions and answers round, where you will have the opportunity to write a question into the Slido chat. Okay, we only have 1 hour, so I propose we start. So let me please start by presenting our panelists from the first session. And in the first session, we have with us Mr. Brendan Devlin, who is an advisor at the DG Energy European Commission. We have with us Mr. Andris Piebalgs, a professor from Florence School of Regulation and a former EU commissioner. And we have with us also Mr. Antoine Ronstadt, who is a chairman of Kairos, a leading company helping to measure the methane emissions globally. So I will give the floor first to Brendan, please.
Dziękuję. It's a pleasure to speak to you today about methane. The European Commission has been working on methane issues since 1996. We had our first methane strategy in 1996, which led to a 60% reduction in methane from the waste sector. We are now working on the Fit for 55 package and the Global Methane Pledge. The Fit for 55 package will result in a 35 to 37% reduction in methane emissions in the European Union. And the Global Methane Pledge is a global commitment to reduce methane emissions by 30%. So we have a lot of targets in front of us, but in the European Union, an extremely good record of meeting our commitments in the past. We know that we can reduce methane emissions within the European Union and globally by 30% using existing technologies and ways to manage life cycles of methane emissions. And our job now is to implement that. In the oil and gas and coal sector, the majority of the methane emissions that are associated with consumption inside the European Union, the majority of the emissions are outside of the European Union. And that is why we have to work so much with our colleagues and friends in the Eastern Partnership and in the near neighborhood to bring about those methane emissions. We will also be using very good data sources in the future, provided at the United Nations level, and we will be relying on satellite providers to give us very good oversight of what is actually happening outside of the European Union. Last year, the European Union adopted its methane communication in October 2020, and this year we will be bringing forward legal obligations on companies in the European Union to measure, report, and verify their methane emissions at the highest level. And those obligations we will expect to be extended throughout the supply chain for coal, gas, and oil for suppliers to the European Union. And that will require us to reach out and work with Russia, the United States, Algeria, Azerbaijan, the transit states that bring oil, gas, and coal to the European Union, to make sure that they have compatible and hopefully as rigorous systems for measurement, reporting, and verification on their infrastructure as we have in the European Union. The Global Methane Pledge means that we are now responsible for our supply chains. We are not talking about reducing methane emissions within our territory, but we are talking about helping our partners and our friends to reduce the methane emissions on their territories. And I think that is a very important impact from this new type of agreement at COP26, that we are taking common endeavors, not national endeavors. And as we look to implement those things, we need to reach out to third countries very much. We think the Eastern Partnership needs to work on these issues. We will help you and the companies associated with you to do that. We will work through the energy community as well. And we know that the energy community has been extremely active and very useful in propagating the message that methane emissions must reduce swiftly over the period till 2030. So the political moment is there. There is momentum building, and we have the institutions in embryonic form that will help us achieve our goals. Thank you very much. I hope to be able to answer as many questions as possible, and I hand it back to Adrian.
Thank you very much, Brandon. One quick questions already that came to my mind. You said about attracting others to follow the European Union way, and we know that from Eastern Partnership group, only half of the countries, so 3, decided to join GMP. And I was wondering if Commission has any silver bullets on how to attract other missing 3 countries to join the effort. Do you know already what Commission is going to do to attract and ask those countries to support the GMP initiative?
Well, we won't use silver bullets. They are fatal, but we will have ways to attract the Eastern Partnership countries. You have to bear in mind also that there are member states of the European Union who have signed, some have not signed. It really depends on explaining the situation more thoroughly. For some countries, they have reservations about agriculture specifically, and that has to be dealt with. But we will be reaching out to the countries that have so far not signed up to the Global Methane Pledge, working with our American colleagues. Do remember that this is a joint EU-US proposal. We will be working with our American colleagues to persuade all the countries that supply the European Union to join the Global Methane Pledge. And lastly, I should point out that the way we are moving on the legislative package is to suggest that those who do not take up obligations under the Global Methane Pledge, they will be put at a disadvantage in the domestic European Union energy markets in the future.
Okay, thank you so much. I will now hand over to Professor Peebles. Please, the floor is yours.
Yeah, well, thank you, Adrian, for organizing this. I think it's great that at this time we organize also for energy Eastern Partnership, also cooperation issues. And definitely methane is exactly that one. I must apologize because I am in Glasgow, and I thought that I have had a quiet corner, but unfortunately, if the quiet corner is not anymore very quiet, so if you hear some noises and see some people, well, my apologies. No, for me, I think it's crucial what has been achieved here in COP with Global Methane Pledge, because Global Methane Pledge cover not just national contributions, it's global emissions. So we have a goal to achieve 30% reduction of global methane emissions compared to 2020. And even if the country X has not joined it, it does not mean that it will not be influenced by this pledge, because you can act also on demand side. So it's not, I would say, nice that some big producer countries of oil and gas have not joined, but it's first of all, they could join later. But secondly, actions will influence the global methane emissions directly or indirectly. So it is an enormous endeavor. Second, today we have had very good news from US joining International Methane Emission Observatory, basically body under UNEP that will try to be objective driver of the methane emission data. There are many streams, and Antoine will speak about particularly powerful tool in observation and measurement of some satellites. But there are a lot of things that you need also to take from different sources, and also to encourage companies to deliver on the methane pledge. And that's exactly where IMEO is going. And it's what I would say, it's not any more in embryonic state. It's really advancing well, and it's based activities on scientific knowledge, scientific development. So I think that changes the dynamic around methane. It's not only partial, it's global. It is not only oil and gas, but all methane emissions. And it is an extremely powerful tool to deliver what member countries of the UN has promised, to keep 1.5 degrees target. And I think without methane action, it's impossible. About Eastern Partnership countries, they are definitely not the biggest emitters of methane. But if we see on oil and gas from just Global Methane Tracker, IEA Methane Tracker, then Azerbaijan's emissions in 2020 are being estimated as 276 kilotons. And this is roughly 0.4% of sector's emissions. So it's not completely negligible. The same with Ukraine, 262 kilotons, and it's 0.3% of the emissions. And if we would take overall, it would be closer from Eastern Partnership coming to 1% of the emission. And it's not the biggest, but it is a significant number. But the interesting thing with methane is that abatement is also profitable. So it's a lot of things you can do with no net cost and also some profit. Because what I mentioned for Azerbaijan and Ukraine, so you could basically abate 50% of the costs just by, well, investing wisely in abatement. So there is no net costs. And these are elements that already have been mentioned by Brendan, that comes in the new legislative proposal. It is using of leak detection and repair actions for downstream and particularly for upstream. That gives immense advantages to the component. Then to replace existing devices, replace like pumps, install new devices like vapor recovery units. So there is a technologies, knowledge, and in a lot of cases, there is no net costs. There is additional aspects that we need to take into account, and sometimes is being forgotten, especially when people speak about emissions from waste or agriculture. They forget that also methane emissions affect health. And that I think is something that need to be better delivered, because methane emissions provokes also death. So I would say that is aspects that we need to look upon. There is already quite a lot broad of set of actions. I know that some of the companies have joined OGMP 2.0 initiative. I know that in the energy community framework, there is already some reports about TSOs emissions on some DSOs. So there is a good basis to grow, but at the end of the day, it's common endeavor. It's common endeavor for the world, it's common endeavor for EU, and it's common endeavor also for Eastern Partnership countries. So I believe this is one of the good avenues to really to strengthen cooperation, in also perhaps other areas on basis of the knowledge of it, because this is win-win area. And for me, that means that we could achieve some good breakthroughs also in actions on Eastern Partnership. So I will stop here, and I'm definitely happy to answer the questions.
Thank you so much, Professor. In the second part of our meeting, we will have a representative of Naftogaz who will certainly touch upon OGMP and other initiatives that are targeting this part of Europe. I will now hand over to Antoine, who is CEO of Kairos. As I said, please, Antoine, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Adrian. So I am in my Airbnb in Glasgow, so I will present some slides because it's better than my background here. The idea is to quickly go through, what we can see now, thanks to the European Union investment in monitoring satellites, in particular, Copernicus constellation, in terms of detecting methane, which is really at the heart of any delivery on the Global Methane Pledge. Next slide, please. So there are two satellites that can detect methane that has been launched by Europe. The first one, where you see an image on the top, is Sentinel-5P. It goes across the globe every day, and it detects large plumes of methane and concentration of methane on a global basis. So you see here the detection of a pipeline maintenance event with two plumes separated by 40 kilometers, which are two valve stations. And we can detect quite a few of these events automatically, thanks to the algorithm that we've developed on Sentinel-5P. But we can also use Sentinel-2, to zoom and know exactly where it's coming from. So the good thing that we have the full coverage of the globe with Sentinel-5 that we can treat every day, and then we can zoom in thanks to Sentinel-2. So it's a very powerful tool to detect methane. And that's really the basis for, as I say, verification of the success of the Global Methane Pledge. Next one. So when we cracked, the Sentinel-5P imagery a bit more than 1 year ago, we saw that there will be very few very large events, so events above 10 tons per hour. And unfortunately, we've discovered that there were many such events, most of them coming from oil, gas, and coal, and in regions that are not necessarily the one producing more oil. If you look at that in Saudi, there is almost no releases of methane when it's quite prolific in the US, in Russia, or in Iran and Iraq. If we look at the European Union itself, there is very few of these large events of methane, mainly around the coal mines. But that's, as Brendan said, a lot of work has been already done, so there is no large releases of methane on the European pipeline. Next one. We have a partnership with Bloomberg, and Bloomberg has been investigating and discussing with many operators, and we had a lot of confirmation from operators of the location and flux of these methane releases. So the technology now has moved from experimental a bit, 6 months ago to a technology that is operational, global, and that can be used on an industrial basis. Now, if we zoom next slide, if we zoom a bit on the vicinity of Europe on the eastern part, most of the events that we are seeing are either linked to the production in the Urals or to the Brotherhood and Yamal pipeline. So we see a lot of event links to the pipeline maintenance, and there are relatively little, detection in the Arctic, Yamal production region. So the interest of this map is that it shows the large events, but it gives an indication of the overall emission, obviously, and you can differentiate between producing region and transport. And in that case, there are quite a few releases of methane linked to the transportation of gas into Europe through the two major pipeline network. Next slide. If we zoom a bit more on the eastern part of Europe, there are a few detections in Ukraine, in Belarus and Lithuania, some in Poland, again more on the cold region, but basically that's relatively small, and most of the large releases come from the east part of Russia, on the producing part of either oil producing region or the pipeline. Next. Then other sources of energy to Europe is Algeria, and there the emissions are coming mainly from the production region, Asir Mel and Asime Saud, but not really from the transportation. So that's the issue. There is more linked to the production, to aging infrastructure in the producing part of the producing asset of Algeria. Next. In the US, it's mainly producing region, shale region. So the Permian, the Appalachians are very large emitters of methane, while the transportation system are, there are some leakage, some releases during maintenance, but overall, the most of the large emitters that we see in the US are linked to, to producing, to the production of oil and gas and coal. Next. So finally, this kind of tool enables us to see trends, which will be essential to see whether the GMP is delivering on its promises. The bad news is, we have seen a decrease in super emitters during COVID, but today, 2021, you see the slope of the number of events. We had 40 of this large event last week alone. This is very similar to 2019, pre-COVID. So de facto, there has been no noticeable changes in operating procedures and in large releases of methane that we can see from satellites. So we really believe and we hope that thanks to the European Union legislation, thanks to the GMP and the IMO, we'll see this trend, flattening so that we can stop all these super emitters that should not happen, because as that has been said before, it is money accrual to stop this event, because you can monetize the gas instead of releasing it. So that was that ends my small technology presentation, and I give it back to you, Adrian.
Thank you so much. That was really fascinating to see all those maps, and that gives you a better understanding, I think, of what's happening globally with the leaks of methane. All right, let's see if we have any questions to our panelists from the first session. We should see them on the screen. While we await, I have one question to Professor Peebles on the latest report published by IMEO, which of course you contributed to, and if you could tell us what are the key findings of the report. We know that it was published quite recently, 1 week ago. So perhaps you could be able to share with us key findings of the report.
Yeah, this is the first report for IMEO because we wanted not to lose time, and the main purpose of it was really to indicate the issues that brought us to establishing observatory. Then also theory of change, why you need really to proceed. There is also reflections on the data coming from OGMP 2.0, because that I think is very powerful stream, not only for data, but also for action. And then there is also vision of what we will do in next report. So if you would look for this report for a lot of set of data, then you would be well upset, because it's not at this stage what we would like to have, because we would like to have really credibility of data coming from different sources that well describe methane emission situation. But it's still worthwhile reading, because it is a first, and we will advance on the same basis that we have presented in the first report.
Okay, thank you so much, Professor. And Antoine, how do you see the role of companies like yours contributing to the organizations like International Methane Emissions Observatory?
So for us, the methane data is a public good. There is an absolute urgency to reduce methane emissions. So we are going to contribute to open source our data through the IMEO in order for regulators, investors, consumers, operators to understand what's going on. I think it's absolutely essential. So we've decided to contribute our data to the IMEO because there is, transparency is absolutely necessary if we want to act very quickly. So that will be our contribution.
Okay, I have one more question to Brendan. We saw from the maps that that pipelines coming from Russia to Europe and transmitting gas, like Yamal and Brotherhood, are a big problem apparently. Do you have any immediate solutions or ways how to engage Russia in this common goal of reducing those emissions on the way to Europe?
You've asked the easiest question, Adrian. And my instinct is to pass it to my former commissioner, Mr. Peebles, and say that this is one for you, but I won't. I think when we were putting together the methane strategy, we were very conscious that the European Union has 6 external gas suppliers, effectively, and what we wanted to make sure is that each of those is treated fairly in comparison to the others. And we put forward a metric called the Methane Supply Index. The Methane Supply Index is supposed to give an overall figure of methane emissions between the point of production and the point of consumption. As the Kairos data shows, different suppliers are in different situations. Algeria, for example, there is more methane emissions and flaring in the production phase. In the United States, there is quite a lot of methane emissions which are not counted because they are pre-production methane emissions, so before accounting even starts. And in Russia, there seems to be, from the data I saw today, relatively few emissions in the production phase, but quite a lot in the long-distance transmission phase. I think what we need to do is to have a proper assessment of the three different phases and then add up the alternatives. Add up all the cumulative effects of the emissions, and then think again about how to engage with third parties about this. We've always made it clear that we need good data. That's the first thing before we can take action. And we will not have good data until we have at least 2 to 3 years of the operation of the IMEO, 2 to 3 years of reports from the IMEO and others. And that also coincides with the period when we will start to be making choices about future oil, gas, and coal supply to the European Union, because in the 1.5 degree scenario, as outlined by the IEA, there will start to be a drop in demand for oil, gas, and coal in the European Union from 2025. So the timing is good for good measurement for 2 to 3 years, and then for further choices to be made. And our legislation will anticipate that timeline. So there is the opportunity for our third countries to do their best right now to clean up whatever issues they have in their pipelines or in their production areas.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I see that we have a question from our audience. Yeah, so the first one, I think it's to Antoine. How do results emissions observed using the Sentinel satellites compare with other methane observing satellites? And the second question is how and when would machine learning and artificial intelligence will contribute in different data sources of methane normalization and processing? Mm-hmm. Okay, I think the questions are rather to Antoine. They're like super technical to my mind. Mm-hmm. Please, Antoine.
Okay, so there are many satellites that can see methane. So from Sentinel-2, Sentinel-5, GSG-SAT, and Prisma, Landsat 8. There is a good calibration of the measurement per satellite. So the science behind the detection and quantification of methane, which is based on atmospheric inversion, is pretty known and solid. So there is no major discrepancy. There are uncertainty always, because of the instrument, detection threshold and something like that. But there is quite a lot of consistency. Now, each satellite will see something different. So you will see different part of the elephant. So it's more a matter of what every satellite can see rather than inconsistency between measurement. What we need is more satellites, and the more satellites we get, the more precise and thorough and global will the measurements will be. And to do that, a lot is driven by machine learning and artificial intelligence, because we have a a set of plumes that we have detected, and we can then train the algorithm to detect more of them. And in Garros, we are working with several satellite providers to train the algorithm and make sure that we use the data set that we've developed in detecting all this methane plume, in the last 2 years since Sentinel-5, and use that to train other satellites in order to have, again, the best possible coverage. So science is progressing. Science is really solid, and the more satellites we have, the better we will be in detecting methane.
Thank you very much. Thanks to all of our speakers of the first session. I would like to now move smoothly to the second panel, in which we will have the perspective of the natural gas sector. And I would like to welcome Mr. Alexei Ryabchin, who is advisor to the board of Naftogaz on low carbon businesses. And I would like to welcome also Ms. Isabella Stocker, who is methane advisor at BP. And I will give the floor to Mr. Ryabchin as the first one. Please, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. It's a big honor for me to be presented at this panel. Hi from Glasgow. I'm also a COP negotiator from Ukraine. It's my 6th COP, and I'm quite excited to represent both national company and Ukrainian nations at this climate conference, and we do hope that it will end up successfully. Next slide, please. Some general information about the methane emission by country. We see that Ukraine emit a lot of methane, and if the next slide will show that, next slide, please. Yeah, that we, according to the data from the World Bank, we are at the 24th place in the world on the methane emission, but like we can see that gradually the methane emission are reducing in Ukraine due to a different reason, due to the technology advance, due to more attention to this place, and also due to the coal mine infrastructure and in the coal mines closure, and also depletion of some of the oil and gas fields in Ukraine. Next slide, please. According to the International Energy Agency, which already been mentioned in a previous panel, the emission from oil and gas sector in 2020 has been according to 262 kilotons, which is 0.3 of a global emission. And the emission types is mostly from venting, fugitive emission, or incomplete flare. Next slide, please. Yes, and the good news that methane emission in Ukraine can be eliminated at little or no net cost. So basically, total methane is 57% all scope 1 and scope 2. And there are a lot of possible abatements, and there are a lot of possible multiple emission reduction choices. It's an early replacement of devices, replacing of pumps, replacing compressor seals or rod, replacing with instrument air system, different techniques that we at the company benefit from having more methane left in our pipes to deliver it to the end consumer. Next slide, please. We started to do our program on the methane emission reduction by signing a memorandum on the methane emission reduction with EBRD and the Ministry of Environment. It helped us to attract grants and attract some experienced companies like Carbon Limits that help us to do the measurement campaign in our UGV and UTG. It's our extraction unit and our storage unit. And last year, we did the second stage of measurement campaign and also prepared a joint OGMP report. We submitted this year the report under the OGMP 2.0 and looking forward to do the compliance with level 4 of OGMP requirements by 2024. But moreover, we are looking forward for the implementation of the measures from the investment program that help us to define the most cost-effective solution from this report. Next slide, please. Yes, and we recently joined the Global Methane Pledge, and our CEO signed a letter to the Ministry of Environment a couple of weeks ago, and we welcome the joining Ukraine of Global Methane Pledge, and note that greenhouse gas reduction, including methane, is one of the company's priorities, which is stated in our corporate strategy. Next slide, please. Yes, and I guess this is like the most interesting slide that we are willing to share from the report of carbon limits. That like we have our reported emission verified by the that we did according to all the methodology, but the report from carbon limits show that there is a potential of undetected emission according to their different technologies. And this making us essential to ensure for industry standard emission detection and reporting. So we will continue working on best available estimation, to the best available estimation towards this reporting, because as you know, you can manage only whatever you can measure. So like we are trying to measure and define the exact emission that we are having in Naftogaz. Next slide, please. Also, like we're trying to find where we are according to the best industry standards, and like currently, according to our calculation, we are good on an industry standards according to our colleagues. But like if we will define with potential and detection emission, like we might need to catch up substantial. So definitely, we are developing our well flaring reduction program, our usage of well testing equipment and other methane capture technologies, well monitoring equipment and reduction of well blowing time, modernization of all booster compressor station and other surface infrastructure, leakage identification and prevention of program. And we have our goal to have to be a climate neutral by 2040. According to the all possible best standards, and now we are implementing all of these corporate standards to guidelines, to policies, to politics, because we're responsible companies that extract gas and transfer the gas to the customers. Next slide, please. According to our vision, like currently we are oil and gas company exploring new areas. In 10 years, we would like to be the oil and gas company securing energy independence with diversified demand for gas transit and share of green business and portfolio. And in 2050, we would like to be a sustainable energy company with the focus on renewable and bioenergy with minimized impact on environment and climate. And please, the last slide. We're doing a huge amount of stuff, and we're planning to do hydrogen, biofuel, and biogas, aiming to become the biggest hydrogen producer in Ukraine. We're doing renewable power, energy efficiency, of course, reducing methane emission and flaring, expanding the carbon capture and utilization and storage technology, and offsetting and environmental protection. Thank you very much, and I'm ready to answer to your question.
Thank you very much, Oleksiy. Before I pass the floor to Isabella, I just wanted to ask you about the OGMP 2.0. You mentioned that Naftogaz joined this initiative some time ago, and I wanted to ask you what was your motivation then, and what are the first lessons learned from participating in it?
Thank you for the question. Like we joined because we are the responsible company, and it's not just a word for us because we are as the country willing to integrate to the European Union. We're adopting all of the European acquis according to energy, like third energy package. And for example, the transportation system has been unbundled from Naftogaz. So to be aligned with the world best standards, we are trying to find a good practice. And OGMP for us, it's like for the first time, it's a good practice on the level of the emission. And also we are looking forward for the EU regulation. We are in constant contact with the Energy community, as you rightly mentioned, they are quite active in this. I guess in 1 month we are having a big methane event, and we will be presented there. So we are trying to catch up and to be in full response with the EU acquis, and this is why we are doing all of this, showing our real emission and real possible emission. And also for us, it's a matter of attracting the investors, because we participated in a Global Methane Pledge call with the Office of Climate and Work Area and also of Timmermans. And for us, like the question was like, we are joining. Definitely, it's for us this Global Methane Pledge, but how it will help us to attract the investment? Because on the one hand side, it's like almost at no net cost or little net cost, but like you need to invest in it. You need to have the best equipment. And for us, it's a matter to combine the political commitments with the finance opportunities and with the technology. So this is definitely what Naftogaz as a national producer will be doing the following years.
Okay, thank you. Fair enough. Thank you very much. And now I pass the floor to Isabella, please.
Thank you, Adrian, and thank you to the organizers for giving me the opportunity to speak today. If we go to the next slide, please. I will be talking about BP's overall strategy and sustainability framework and what we're doing about methane as a whole. But very pleased to be here in this session because we have a large business in Azerbaijan. We've been in Azerbaijan for almost 3 decades now. Looking at the numbers up to the first quarter of this year, we've produced almost 4 billion barrels of oil from the Azerbaijan area and 145 billion cubic meters of total gas in Shah Deniz since first gas in 2006. So very big producing region for us. And we also export this gas through the pipeline into Europe. But now speaking about BP's new strategy. Back in 2020, last year, which was a long time ago, we announced a new purpose and the ambition to become a net zero company by 2050 or sooner, and helping the world to get to net zero as well. And on the left-hand side of the slide, you see the sustainability framework, which really has 3 focus areas where we feel we can make the most difference. In blue, I'm getting to net zero, which is what I'm talking about today, but also improving people's lives and caring for the planet. And this is underpinned by 20 aims. You see here the 10 aims that relate to net zero. But for today, I will focus on aim 4, which you see in the bottom right corner here, but also on the next slide, please. You see the text. So it is to install methane measurement at our major oil and gas processing sites by 2023, then publish the data and drive a 50% reduction in methane intensity in our operations. And we will work to influence our joint ventures to set their own methane intensity targets of 0.2%. This aim is very much aligned with OGMP 2.0 that we've already talked about extensively now. But how do we plan to do this in BP? Next slide, please. We've already heard about IMEO and the importance of measurement. Where we are today is that pretty much all of our emissions are estimated using industry averaged emissions factors and engineering calculations. We found that's really not an accurate reflection of the real emissions. So by 2023, we aim to have 75% of our emissions covered by measurement. We won't stop at 75%. This is just 2023 targets. Eventually, we'll look to have more than 95% of emissions measured. This will be a combination of bottom up and top down. Bottom up is at the source level, meaning direct measurement of flares, exhaust gases, vents, fugitives, etc. And top down is a site level measurement that verifies that all emissions are captured in the bottom up measurements. We've heard a really great presentation about satellites, which falls into that category, but also aircraft, drones, and variety of technologies out there. If we move to the next slide, please, I'll give one example of where we are active in measurement. Flaring is one of our biggest sources of methane outside the onshore US business. We participate in the Global Gas Flaring Reduction Partnership and World Bank Zero Routine Flaring by 2030. What is routine flaring? That's where the gas exceeds operating limits and needs to be disposed of by flaring because it can't be exported. So that might be in oil fields which have a small associated gas with it, where it is not economic to build the infrastructure to sell it. So we're committed to zero routine flaring, but first and foremost, flares are a safety feature. We can't stop it altogether because we would lose an essential relief valve to the facility. So when we do need to continue to flare for safety reasons, we must make sure that we've optimized the efficiency of the flare and have the high quality data to understand and report the correct amount of gas flared. To measure it, we are looking at 3 different components. The first is the volume of gas sent to flare. We've installed flare meters there and supplemented it with computational models to be really sure that the readings are accurate. We are installing inline gas analyzers to record the composition. Natural gases are a mixture of gases and can have varying ratios of methane to, say, carbon dioxide, which wouldn't be contributing to the methane intensity. But finally, the most important factor to the emissions is the combustion efficiency. If 100% of gas sent to flare was burned, there wouldn't be any methane associated with it. But the emissions factor that's commonly accepted is that it's about 98% combustion efficiency. In some areas, it's less than that. But if you can think about, some areas might report 70%, there is others 98%, a huge range of emissions that could really be coming from it. So we must measure that. But measuring destruction efficiency in the field is notoriously difficult. So what we do instead is use predictive analytics, where we take data from the flare meters, the gas composition and environmental factors, and convert them to a real-time combustion figure. So these real-time insights then enable the operations manager to take steps to rectify any deviations that may occur. And it's not just a prediction, it has been validated against a technique called VISA, it's video imaging spectral radiometry. That's where a camera measures the ratio of carbon dioxide to methane in the hot gases around a flare. If we move to the next slide, I'll give another example. That's now on gas turbines fired exhausts. That's the second most important source of methane outside the onshore US for our business. Turbines are used to facilitate by facilities to generate their own power, but it's also for gas compression and gas export from the facility. And again, in theory, if all the gas was burned, we wouldn't have a methane problem. But depending on the turbine load, the gas composition, turbine age, a small amount of the gas sent to the turbine does not burn and escapes into the atmosphere through the exhaust. There are some ways where we can locally measure what is actually coming from the exhaust, but they're very costly systems and difficult to install retrospectively. So again, we resort to a predictive monitoring system. This one, so predictive emissions monitoring system, PEMS. Like with the flare calculation, it's based on models and measured data. Data could be flow rate, the turbine load, and it's predicting the outcome. And it is calibrated against the stack sampling that I've measured. And we will also take periodic samples later on to just keep validating and improving the model and ensure the good data quality. So there are just 2 examples of measurement that we are deploying. Azerbaijan is also a great test area for us to test other camera technologies, drone technologies. So a lot more to come in this space. But for now, I'll stop here and I'm happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Isabella. Before I read the questions that arrived on Slido. I have one, especially for you. Well, you represent a big global company that is active in many regions of the world, also in Eastern Partnership countries like Azerbaijan. And I was wondering, your transition agenda is very ambitious, but I was wondering if you, how do you, or if you try to engage also with your joint ventures partners like globally, and you try to encourage them also to follow your path to net zero, for example, or to be more ambitious in cutting the methane emissions. Do you try to be like a role model for your partners, or do you like let them be as they wish?
No, great question. Definitely would love to be seen as a role model. I hope we are. Partnering is a really important part of our overall strategy. We are actively working with our joint venture partners on a number of areas that include methane management, but also the broader net zero agenda, broader sustainability aspects. To facilitate that conversation, we have established a Center of Excellence for NOJVs, non-operated joint ventures, to support the teams within BP who work with NOJV to provide them the knowledge needed to support the NOJV partner. We have also signed several memorandum of understandings and entered into strategic collaborations with some of our partners, such as ADNOC and Rosneft, so Abu Dhabi and Russia, for people who don't know those companies. We expect these sort of engagements and influencing activities to continue and intensify in years to come. But it's absolutely, we want to share our knowledge with them, provide them with the tools they need to drive the energy transition. There's certainly interest there, and we just need to equip them with the right tools to make that transition. Thank you for that question.
Thank you. And very quickly, let's take a look at the questions that we got from Slido. If most of the spots are related to operation of pipelines, is there a risk that this may happen with Nord Stream 2 after its launch as well? And will there be any additional assessment given the high anticipation to launch this pipeline? So maybe I will leave that for Oleksiy. What do you think? Are you able to answer, to comment on that?
Thank you. Definitely, this is the right question. The position that we have and the calculations that the Ukrainian state has according to the Nord Stream operation and the whole chain of gas extraction and transition through this channel is much more bigger than the emission that we have by transporting the gas through Ukraine. So it's like we consider the Nord Stream 2 not only not according to the EU acquis, not according to the not corresponding with the third energy package, which should differentiate the membership, the ownership, and the transportation, and also it's more environmentally harmful for the Europe. So for us in Ukraine, it looks a bit, we are like a bit concerned that on the one hand side, the European Union declared about the Green Deal, Fit for 55, carbon neutrality. On another hand, it intensified the emissions that are now in Russia and through the Nord Stream, while not investing to the, for example, modernization of the existing roads. And like if Nord Stream will be launched, it will be also quite problematic for Ukraine to maintain the pipeline. So we have lots of questions to European Union. That's why. And to the Germany, basically, that's why we, together with our Polish colleagues, we already applied to the certification authority in Germany and into the European Union, and we are actively trying to use exactly the climate arguments also in the rhetoric. So definitely, we could share our findings and the recent methane leakage in Russia is just the best example of the situation that we have with the Nord Stream 2.
Okay, thank you very much. Let's conclude with this very happy aspect of Nord Stream 2 pipeline. I would like to thank all of you, dear participants, for finding the time and discussing with us this very important issue of methane emission leaks. Thank you so much for this, for your contribution to our Eastern Partnership Energy Group. We really appreciate that, and we hope that you will be able to join our future initiatives as well. Thanks a lot, and thanks also to our audience, and thanks for all the questions. We ran out of time, so I stop here. Thank you again. Thank you very much.
Thank you.